You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is...
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm super excited to have Oliver Jeffers on the phone with me today. He has a brand new book. It's called What Will Build, and this is a phenomenal picture book. I love this, Oliver, and the more I dig into your bio and look at all of the things that you've done, the more fascinated I am with your journey as a storyteller. So I'm excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So, Oliver, we begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Well, that's a tricky question to answer because normally it's people who are making books and who are authors. And I've always considered myself as an artist who uses words as a string in their bow, and not really quite an author or a writer. But as a storyteller, that's a different thing. And I think for the longest time, I've actually been a storyteller without realizing it, because a lot of the painting that I was making, a lot of the fine art painting I was making before I fell into picture books was ultimately about storytelling. So my first memory of wanting to be a storyteller doesn't exist because I was one before I knew that I was one.
I make that distinction, between a writer or storyteller, because I do believe that storytellers come in all shapes and packages,
Exactly.
other than just the typical writer that we think of, and that's why I say it like that.
Yeah, and that's why the art is all about narrative too. Even abstract art is narrative in some nature, and we have to learn how to read an image at some point in our lives, and then that becomes an intuitive thing. But like visual literacy is a real thing. And how long have I known that I'd wanted to be an artist? I suppose I've always loved making art. And it wasn't until I realized that was a real thing that you could do to make a living. I was maybe 12 or 11 or 12. And I thought that's for me.
So as someone who wanted to be an artist and you had this realization that this is something that you could be, I think one thing that's very misunderstood in our society today is how does an artist actually make a living? Because I think, God love them, but there are a lot of guidance counselors at school and people that help put kids on the, the right path toward, finding their bliss and in work and whatever. I think that when a kid says, I'm an artistic soul, I want to tell stories for a living, I think a lot of people don't have any clue how to guide that person. So what does an artist do to make a living?
Oftentimes those people don't need guiding, because if you want to make money and get into the arts, it's a very rare combination that you could make art that you love and make money.
Right.
You got to be doing art because you love it, because you have to. You have no choice but to. Do those people need guiding? I don't know if they do so much. But anybody says, I think making art will be an interesting career path. It is a bold move if you're not convinced that that's something that you just feel compelled from the bottom of your soul to do. It's like there's a friend of mine, the French artist JR, says that making art is being willing to fail publicly. And there is a lot of art, a lot of great art doesn't make money, but it's making great art and it's making people feel better. And it's the artist is sharing the innermost depths of their soul. They're exposing that for public consumption, and that's not for everybody. So it's a kind of a simple equation. It was like, do it because you love it, not because you think you're going to get rich.
Gotcha. You have a fantastic accent, Oliver. Where does that accent from?
This is a Belfast accent in Northern Ireland.
You did a great TED Talk this year, an ode to living on Earth, and you kind of make a kind of a cheeky comment about this accent is from Earth, but there is a point where you point out on the globe where Belfast is, and the place that you point to is the largest landmass on the globe at that point. Did you do the illustrations for that video?
I did, yeah. It might not be geographically accurate.
I thought it was funny.
They're always slightly twisted according to the hand creating them, and that's another example.
I love it. What Will Build, your latest book, is like your 19th kids book. Is that right? That sounds like it could be right. How did you get started in this field? I talk to children's authors a lot, and these books seem to be simple. People would be like, "Oh, I'm going to do a kids book because I can do this quickly," and it's not very difficult to do. And then the people that sit down and try it find out that they're the most difficult things in the world to do and to do well. How did you get started in this line?
Well, let me address that first. It was like, I think you're absolutely right. I love going to modern art museums with my dad and him saying things like, well, sure, I could have made that. And I was like, well, no, Dad, you maybe you could have, but you didn't. And because this artist did, and they thought of it. And creating art often isn't just about applying something to a blank sheet of paper. And picture books are a great example of this. Often it's about chiseling everything else away from a block of stone. And because it's, seeing the simple truth in a very complicated, noisy, distracting world. That is often what art is. That is what simple art is knowing what to get rid of and still have the essence. So the simpler something is, normally the more difficult it has been to make.
You have also done some commercial art, and some of that being album covers and music videos. How do those types of things factor into your artistic expression, and do those occupy a different space than other things that you do, or is it all part of your kind of vast quiver of expression?
It is a little bit, though. I haven't. I used to take on commercial illustrations, but I haven't done that in nearly a decade. At the beginning of my career, it was as a way to try and make ends meet. But I quickly realized that I was frustrated by trying to visually solve other people's problems, and that it just got in the way of me trying to make the art that moved me and compelled me, and that was self-generated. So I don't really take on commercial illustrations anymore at all. And the things that you're talking about are an exception, where that's been a collaboration, and that's with you two, where we met socially and we really got along well, and they got me to do one thing, which led to the idea for another thing and another thing. And I think there was a 2-year period where I was doing a lot of work with them. But that was much more collaborative than it was gun for hire stuff. But at that point, it was, I did struggle to fit it in, because because somebody else was paying for it, that demanded attention, priority over my own work. And then my own work kept getting shoved to the side until I had to put a stop on it and say, no, enough of this. This is what I want to say. This is what I want to be doing. But there was one good side of taking on commercial jobs was that I could throw myself into experimental methods of making art on somebody else's dime.
That always helps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Your latest book, What Will Build, I think I've heard you talk about that this came out of some talks that you had with your daughter, or she inspired you to want to write this. Your daughter Mary is your second child, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. Our older child, Harland, our son, he's 5 now, and when he came along, I made Here We Are, Notes for Living on Planet Earth, which is kind of like this nonfiction guide, very simple, very basic guide to what it is to be the basic principles of humanity, what it is to be a person walking around on Earth in the 21st century. And it's very much about understanding the world as it is now. and that jump from not being a parent to being a parent and the mind shift that comes with that. But so then with what we'll build is it's about looking forward to an unknown future, and rather than understanding the world, it's about possibly changing it or building a better one. And it was written over a year ago, and the art was made over a year ago, and I had no idea how actually relevant that as a theme would be this year.
Yeah, it's funny how the themes come back around, and I don't know if it's that we kind of overlay our own meaning on top of it, or if there is, if there's some subtext there that we just weren't looking for at the time. But I'm always fascinating at how meaning comes out of things like that.
I do think it's a little bit about it. You apply your own meaning, and
yeah,
like one of the characters that I've created that seems to always be people's favorite is the Penguin, and I've always found that funny because he doesn't really do anything or say anything. And it occurred to me that the reason that he's people's favorite is because he's a blank canvas, he's a mirror that people can project themselves onto. And so they can let themselves into the story and put themselves in there, or he can become anything that they want him to be.
I want to come back to that idea of characters that show up in the book. And I want to touch on that in just a minute. I have a specific question to ask you about that. But you said that your oldest son Harlan is 5 now. Looking back at your body of work, you were doing children's books before you had children of your own. Is that right?
Yeah, I made about 15 books before I had children of my own.
Wow. Did having children, did that change your idea of the work that you create for children? Did that inform anything new for you when you had children of your own?
Well, yeah, Here We Are was a direct result of having a kid, and the internal dialogue that you have with yourself about that. And then what we'll build is also the same. The book that came in between them, The Fate of Fausto, was actually written before either of them were born, and then was just sort of put to the side to make room for Here We Are. So since they've been born, I haven't really made an old-fashioned storybook, but I dare say that when I do go to do that some of the influence of having kids and reading stories to them, even like classic traditional Irish stories, or the sort of stories that I am remembering more from when I grew up, will start to have an impact. And even just imagining their reactions to some of the things that I might put in will have an impact. But that hasn't happened in 5 years since they've been born. It's been non-storybooks. So let's see. Time will tell.
Papyrus Author was designed and developed with the modern writer's needs, wishes, and preferences in mind. From big structures right down to tiny details, every single feature of our software has been carefully and meticulously crafted in collaboration with authors. Take charge of your writing with the author interface, which gives you access to different elements of your story, such as characters, backgrounds, and narrative structure. Move sections of your writing seamlessly in the navigator and evaluate the complexity of your text with our expert style and readability analysis. Never worry about losing progress with automated backups. With Papyrus Author, you can be your own writer, editor, and publisher. The world of writing is about to change. Papyrus Author, the word processor for authors, has arrived on the international stage. Unrivaled in its scope, it is the first software suite to unite every single step of creative writing. The vision behind Papyrus Author is to empower everyone with an idea to turn it into a great book for free. A word processing core that matured for over 10 years at its foundation, Papyrus Author goes beyond the text with its intuitive organizing layers for story, characters, notes, and research. The powerful style and readability analysis help raise manuscript quality. The inbuilt publication capabilities take the book directly to the reader with ebooks, docx, and print-ready PDF. Visit papyrusauthor.com to get started today. Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called Pubsite. Pubsite is a service to help you build your very own website, your home on the web, where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. Pubsite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates. Pubsite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, Pubsite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. Pubsite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. Pubsite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting. And we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.
As someone who is a visual artist, as well as a writer, when you create a book like What We'll Build, what comes first for you? Is it the illustrations, or is it a story idea that then you start sketching out? Because I am not a visual artist at all. I can barely draw my name. But a lot of times if I'm thinking about a story idea, I'll doodle things out, and sometimes I'll make little drawings that then help me to visualize the story. And they're strictly just for me, because everyone else would think these are the ramblings of a psychopath or something. But how does that work for you? What comes first, the visual or the story, or is it all kind of interconnected in some strange way?
Normally it's interconnected in some strange way where you imagine the essence of something and you try to figure out what it looks like and what it sounds like at the same time. And that's a fun process, like thumbnailing, where you're trying to hit the story beats, the world might look like. And then when you're trying to squeeze that all into the 32-page structure of a picture book, it's really like a puzzle in some ways. But the last couple of books that I've made have been written in their entirety before I even thought about what they might look like. And that's simply because as I was writing them, I didn't know that they were going to be picture books.
Gotcha. I heard you say one time you were, it was probably in a promotional video that your publisher sent, or I can't remember exactly where it was, but that you talked about this idea of the fox that shows up in your work, and that what this fox came to represent for you, and that you realized that there was sort of hidden meaning in this fox, at least for you. Then I went back and reread the book after hearing that. And, there's a scene in the book where it says, let's build a boat that can't be broken, that will not sink or be cracked open. And then the next page is this boat that's pulled up and docked, and this little cabin in the woods and, snow, it looks like. And that's where the fox first shows up in the story, which I find interesting. But first off, what does the fox represent? And when you say that the fox just showed up, what does that mean to you?
Oh, it's a tricky question to answer. The fox has never been in any of the previous books, and so my daughter Mary is named after my mother, also called Mary, and she died 20 years ago. I think about her all the time, and she's been like this guiding moral compass. And as I was doing the layouts and the sketches for this book, like almost only because the space felt empty, I just drew this character of this fox like sniffing around as they were going into their safe place, in this place that where all that was lost. And then it just seemed natural that fox then will be looking out the window into them and sort of looking over them when they're inside the cabin. And then it's the fox that picks up the compass and leads them into battle. And I hadn't really even pieced it together at this point. It was only when I was making the final pieces of art, that I realized I'd been listening to all my mother's old favorite music, and it dawned on me. And then I phoned my older brother Rory, who designs all the books, and I just says, I think that this fox that I didn't really think too much about, I just was there for the sake of being there, is actually our mother.
Wow. Did you share that with your daughter?
Well, no, she's only 2.5 yet.
Gotcha.
So I haven't really attempted to. And she's only looked at the book once because we only got proofs in not too long ago. And she likes to point out all her favorite toys and all the people she knows. But there'll be time. We'll go over it in depth in the years to come.
That's fantastic. When you're writing, the writing of a book can be a very solitary experience, and there's a lot of time that's just the author or just the illustrator or the combination of the two, like you are, where it's just you and the work, just alone by yourself. And then there comes a point where, there's some collaboration either between you and editors or you and certain designers or whatever. How do you reveal your work to the intended audience? Like, do you have people that you trust, that you show the work to kind of judge reaction?
Yeah, I've got maybe a kind of a rolling list of 10 to 12 people who I would trust, who all come from all different walks of life, and I'll show them things at an early enough stage that any feedback that they have will be actually constructive. But you're right, it is like this is all work that's made in the isolation of the studio, so it is quite a jarring experience to go out into the world and realize that these books have a life outside of the studio, and that they mean something to other people. And that's not something that you're naturally thinking about when you're there alone and in the process of making it, that it will go out there and it will live on, and it will have its own personality. And it's almost overwhelming sometimes. It's a lot to unpack, and you don't really know what to do with that.
When you start sketching out the ideas and the story starts to kind of coalesce, like you talked about earlier, in your process of sketching around until you find the story, do you then write the poetic prose that becomes the text of the book? Do you work that out before all of the sketches are finished? Like, is there a point where okay, I know now what this is going to be about, now let me write out the prose?
There is definitely that. And even after the art is finished, I'm going through and polishing like every word choice and every little bit of grammar, because when there's so few words in a book, each one counts massively. It's got to have that right flow and the right meaning, and there might be a better way to say it. And it's that is probably the thing that gets tweaked and altered right up until the very end.
And that's fascinating to me, because when you're talking to a murder mystery novelist, you've got 100,000 words, give or take, to get the point across, and you can go down all sorts of rabbit trails and tangents and all of this, and bring it back around. When you're talking about a few hundred words, you've got to get straight to the point, and words matter. Every word matters. Is there ever a point of collaboration with anyone? Is there an editor that you bounce things off of? Kind of, what is that part of the process like?
It depends on who you ask. Because yes, I have an editor here in London, and I have an editor in New York, and it's listening to judgment, and I like to work with editors who know that I'm always right, but it's also a matter of having the experience to listen to good advice when it's there in front of you.
You mentioned earlier that this was written last year, and that you didn't really realize how poignant a story this would be in the time that we find ourselves. Are there certain things that just kind of hit you, like a 2x4, like, wow, I didn't know that this was going to be so resonant that it is now? Are there parts of the book that stand out?
Yeah, I really thought that I hadn't thought about the book in a while. And then as we were approaching the release date, I was like, oh, this book was made in the old world and about the old world. I don't know if it's going to be relevant at all. And I just kind of assumed that until I started talking to people about it, and doing a few interviews and realizing just how important it was. And I went back and reread it, and like that when times are hard and needs are greater, and saving the love that you've built earlier and using that to get through. It was like all of that takes on a whole new meaning, a much more powerful meaning. Like clearly I had no idea, just to put on the record, that a global pandemic was coming.
Right. Well, I don't know if you knew this, Oliver, but we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and one that none of us living have gotten to experience before. And I love asking creative people how this time has affected them, because most of us do work at home and alone, and our days are filled with just doodling and sketching and writing and doing the things that we do. And you wouldn't think that being told to stay at home and that sort of thing would affect creative people very much, because we already kind of do that. Yet there have been some interesting mental challenges that have come out of this time. How have you managed the hurdles that 2020 has thrown?
Well, I think there are two types of experiences that people have had in lockdown, and the two types of experiences are those who don't have kids and those who do have kids. So it was like, the people who are just doodling and thinking and reading, and it was like, yeah, that sounds lovely. Whereas those who have young children, their experience of more being tidying toys and wiping bums and taming tantrums, and I think my experience was that at the very early days, I felt a sense of frustration by that I couldn't get any work done. And when I woke up to the fact that this isn't going away anytime soon, and what is going away soon is probably these early days of a child's life. So I've tried to be as present as possible and not really worry about work too much. And I'm at a fortunate point in my career where I can maybe afford to take my foot off the gas and be less constant with it.
What about stay home or stay at home story time? What is that, and how did that come out of this experience?
That was an experience that lasted for a certain amount of time, and we were traveling, as I said, whenever the pandemic started to hit, and we moved very, very quickly, try and get like on a 9-hour flight to get back to Belfast in Northern Ireland, where we were going to hole up. And as I was getting onto the flight, I was thinking, what are we going to do with these kids for being stuck in a tiny apartment all day for like the next month, not knowing it was going to be much longer? And then I thought, well, what are other parents going to do? And it was like, how can I be constructive in some way? And just without really thinking it through too much, I put a post out on Twitter saying I was just going to read one of my stories every day on Instagram Live. And by the time I got off the flight 9 hours later, it had absolutely exploded into something. And it helped give our day structure. And I realized from the comments that were coming in that it was helping other people just this sense of consistency and continuity and like a sort of a calming nature about it all. And I realized how ambitious it was to do it every day, because to try and placate the kids for long enough to get through it and tidy one corner of the house so it didn't look like we'd been burgled. It was a lot of work. And so I started to spread them out a little bit. And then I ran out of material and I was like, I think this has come to its natural conclusion. And by that point, lots of other people were doing it. So I gracefully stepped back. But all the time I'm out and about and people will stop me and just say that it really helped them. And that's a wonderful thing.
That's fantastic. Oliver, what are you working on now? Because, this project is out, available to the world now. What are you working on these days?
Trying to sell this book. Is what I'm trying to work on. And nothing else much, because I haven't had a chance to get back to New York to my studio in over a year.
Wow.
So it's the rest of this year is definitely going to be more about family time. And there's a couple of bigger, longer term fine art projects that have been in the works that just require some emails and some phone calls. So I'm not really working on very much at the minute.
I just remembered that you did an art installation in New York City, I think, talking about the moon and the Earth. What was that, and where can people see what you did there?
They can see that online because it was only a temporary exhibition, but it was it was called The Moon, Earth, and Us, and it was like this kind of poetic, apolitical installation that looked at a scale model of planet Earth and the moon just to show how alone we are in the universe. And it was the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 8 mission around the moon that took that famous Earthrise photograph, which gave birth to the overview effect. And on this part of the Highline Park in New York, people could go along and see this moon that was 2 feet in diameter, and they're 166 feet away. The other end of the block was the Earth, and that was the correct distance and ratio between each other. And as they approached the Earth, they could see it was rotating. They could see every border known to man drawn out onto this globe. But when you got close enough, you could read that instead of the country names that were written in there, it just said over and over again, people live here.
Gotcha. Oliver, if people want to dig into all of the stuff that you do, where can they find you online?
They can find me. My website is a good kind of quick overview of everything, which is oliverjeffers.com. And then for some of the more current commentary on things that are going on and more in-depth, just little snapshots into my life, it's the Instagram, and my handle is @oliverjeffers.
Excellent. We're going to send everyone to see you, and we'll put a link to the new book in the show notes as well. Oliver, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Do you want to get paid to write stories? Do you enjoy collaborating with other talented storytellers? Do you want to work completely remotely and set your own hours? Relay Publishing is looking for writers and editors to work on fiction projects across a range of genres, from thrillers to sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. The Relay process is extremely collaborative, in the same vein as a TV show's writer's room. If you're a story geek, then you'll be on a great team. There are 7 ghostwriting positions and 10 editing positions currently available. Please go to www.recruitment.relaypub.com. That's www.recruitment.relaypub.com for more information on how to apply. Join a great storytelling team today. What Death Taught Terence by Derek McFadden. Life is a journey. So is the afterlife. At the end of his life, Terence MacDonald must discover its meaning, or he'll be banned from the afterlife forever, and his soul will cease to exist. Join Terence and those who love him on a poignant and unforgettable journey through a life at once wonderful and harrowing. Learn what Terence learned. See what Terence sees. By this provocative story's end, readers may even learn a thing or two about themselves. See why people are saying things like, Derek McFadden writes with an insight few can match. If you like the works of Mitch Albom, I think you'll find What Death Taught Terence a worthy addition to your library, and the reading of it a life-affirming journey. I found the story immediately immersive, and it stuck with me long after I finished. What Death Taught Terence by Derek McFadden, on sale now. Invasion Day, the first book in the They Came for Blood series by Scott Moon. David Osage is a dangerous man with a complicated past, but these days he's just trying to keep his head down, driving big rigs. One night he saddles himself with a hitchhiker, a nuisance who's more than she's seen, and that's when everything changes. No one was ready for an alien invasion. Death is raining from the sky, and the only questions left is, do you run, fight, or submit? For David Osage and his family, answering is as easy as giving the alien invaders the finger. Grab Book 1, Invasion Day, in the They Came for Blood series, and then follow it up with Book 2, Resistance Day, and Book 3, Victory Day. Available at Amazon.com.